A year and a half since Ferguson became a hashtag. What comes to mind when you hear the name of the St. Louis suburb that is now known around the world? Let's put it behind us. Let's tackle the work ahead of us. The Ferguson Commission wrapped and left the St. Louis region a list of action items, a way, it said, to move the region forward for everyone. But do we have an actionable plan, the leadership, the will to do it? Can we afford not to? Stay tuned.
So we're going to do the show.
Stay Tuned brings together local experts, journalists, civic leaders, and regular people to have tough conversations for a stronger St. Louis. Add your voice to our conversation, and you're at the table as we stay on top of current events and go deeper, bringing more light and less heat to the issues that matter. From the 9 network of public media in Grand Center, this is Stay Tuned. 5 months ago, the Ferguson Commission released its final report. And as 2015 rolled into 16, the Commission stopped its official duties. So what became of the 189 calls to action featured in the report? A new organization called Forward Through Ferguson is now tasked with bringing together St. Louis area organizations to make the change the Commission called for. Wednesday night, Forward Through Ferguson held a public panel discussion and outlined its plans for the steps ahead. But has optimism waned for the wide-scale changes called for in the report? The Riverfront Times posed the question if Missouri Governor Jay Nixon ignored the Ferguson Commission in his last State of the State address. And others online are showing their skepticism. James Kay says, from poverty to professional plan from the Ferguson Commission is just a reformulation of the rags to riches myth. So is change still possible? Does everyone even think it's necessary? What will it take to make a better STL region, and are we up for the challenge?
So we have the lead catalyst. That's your title for Forward Through Ferguson. Nicole Hudson, welcome to the show.
Thanks.
I'm sure there's probably some intentionality in the title even.
100%.
Tell me about it.
So one of the things that we wanted to do in the design of Forward Through Ferguson is kind of give everybody who works with us that name of catalyst. The idea is really clear that people were dedicated to this work before August 9th, 2014. The report wouldn't have happened without people who had expertise and experience in all of these issues that we're dealing with. What the report really did was create an unprecedented community policy roadmap. So we really just aggregated a lot of existing ideas, existing expertise, and put it together in a way we could all sort of follow together. So the idea that there is a Forward Through Ferguson after the commission is the idea that we're here to catalyze, we're here to facilitate, we're here to leverage what is already happening and what's already invested in.
And just to be clear, is Forward Through Ferguson just an extension? Is it the same as the Ferguson Commission?
I would say no. The commission very specifically was government appointed. We're volunteer commissioners. In that sense, it is not the same. What I do think is that when it was time for the commission to sunset, when we started talking about transitioning, we had very strong feedback from the community and also from some of the commissioners that there were some muscles that the community, the region started to exercise in the process of putting together the report. The idea of radical listening, the idea of collaboration, coming together at tables that we hadn't sat at together before, that people weren't ready to let go of. So in the sense of the principles and the ideals that the commission started to bring out in the region, I would say that it is a continuation of that. But the forum is completely different.
Some voices maybe that weren't being heard before that commission was assembled.
Correct. And I would even say at the beginning of the commission process, and I think people in the community would agree with me, that it took the commission some time to figure out how to really radically listen to the community, and that it wasn't until maybe the last half of the commission process that we really caught our stride there as a region. And so I think people just really weren't ready to let that piece go and saw a real need from all corners of the community to kind of keep that catalyst in place so that we would be held to the fire and continue to go down this path that we really came up with together.
Yeah, because there was definitely a difference you could see between the early meetings
Absolutely.
and the final meetings.
Absolutely.
Is it just listening? Is this just a place for people to vent?
I think something really unexpected happened with the commission. I think a lot of people in a lot of sectors that we spoke with and that we continue to speak with talk about a lack of leadership, a lack of somebody really standing up and saying, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to solve this issue. And so I think that the commission being officially appointed really sort of filled a vacuum that a lot of people were looking for. And so when it first came to being, it was just like everything everybody was feeling in the community just sort of came at the commission. And during the process, you know, we had 19 full public meetings, and it was only the first 2 or 3 that felt that way. I think as we got to the 4th meeting and the 5th meeting, people really started to see that this was a conversation that we were figuring out how to really listen to each other and how to react and really kind of come to the table in a way that we as a region had not done before.
So is Forward Through Ferguson that leadership now that's going to make those action items a reality?
So I would say that the leadership exists in many, many spaces across the community. So Forward Through Ferguson has only been up and running since January 1, and we haven't really been active about saying, hey, we're here, this is what we're doing, here's what's going on. We've kind of been taking care of a lot of dotting of I's and crossing of T's, but even in that space, we've been inundated with people calling us saying, we've adopted these calls to action. We're doing this work. We've already been doing this work. We're aligned. We're adopting. Yes, we know that all 47 of the signature priorities have some sort of official engagement around them, and many of the other calls to action as well. So really what we're here to do is to fill in the gaps, to kind of foster that leadership, help people who've stepped up see how they're aligning, help them align further, and really keep that racial equity lens and the policy focus that was key in the report at the forefront for everybody.
So let's stop right there. What do you mean when you say racial equity lens? Because we've seen some things on social media, people chiming in and saying, you know, we did the survey that Forward Through Ferguson had, and when I got to racial equity lens, you kind of lost me.
Yeah.
We saw that this week on Twitter and other places. So help break this down for us.
Absolutely. So in the report process, it was clear that every data trail led us to this one disparity. So there are lots of disparities that we deal with as a region across the board, but the one glaring disparity was the racial equity disparity. And so there is a great deal of study around the world, around the country. The Aspen Institute has some really great stuff on this idea of a racial equity lens, and it's really kind of putting on a new set of glasses, like literally taking a look through a racial equity lens. And so in the report, we have a call to action that's one of the signature priorities, and it essentially asks you to ask a few questions. You know, who does this disproportionately impact? Does this unintentionally impact a specific group of people, and are we leaving somebody out? And so really just asking those basic questions is a start, but doing things like disaggregation of data, understanding that at the end of whatever policy or the end of whatever program that you see specifically who's benefiting, who's missing out, who's not represented. And so that idea of looking at things through that racial equity lens is something that we see as key important to moving our region forward. We put a path toward racial equity as the subtitle of the report intentionally, because we knew that if we left it out of the title, that we wouldn't talk about it.
It all comes back to race.
It's uncomfortable, it's charged, nobody wants to talk about it, but that's what it comes down to every single time. And if the moral imperative of how our children are being left behind and our families don't have opportunities and our neighbors are, you know, disproportionately impacted by many things, if the moral imperative is not enough, St. Louis is leaving $14 billion in gross domestic product on the table because of these disparities and opportunity for our people in our region. So there are many reasons why that is the thing that we need to deal with in order to truly look at moving forward in a generational way.
Let's pause right there. You said you haven't been too public with what you're doing just yet, but there was a panel discussion this week at the Central Library downtown. Let's hear just a little snippet of that, and then we'll join the rest of the guests at the table.
How do we increase investment in community voice and community decision-making in our initiatives as a key part of achieving racial equity?
I think it has to come from a ground level first. You have to be able to actually engage with the community on a very personal level.
Really just having open, honest, and genuine conversations to really understand, not just listen to provide an answer, but listen to really understand what's going on with the community is really important.
In order to kind of make changes, you do have to involve the voice of the youth, because some of the older people, you know, they can move and they can switch communities, but the young people are going to be there forever, and that's who's going to be making changes, and that's who the future is up to. And so if you don't have an accurate, if you can't accurately depict what the youth wants, then you may as well kiss a bright future goodbye.
It's really about, in my city, in Ferguson, it's about building relationships in neighborhoods and hearing what people want there, what's the most important thing to them, the people who are affected by the inequalities and the disparities, and finding out what people want to organize their power base around.
Okay, Nicole is still with us here at the table. I introduced the rest of the guests here. Welcome back, Rasheen Aldridge, former, now Ferguson Commission member.
Glad to be back.
We are glad to have you. Felicia Pulliam with Focus St. Louis, you're the Director of Policy and Community Engagement, and Stephen Deere, reporter with the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Thanks to all of you for being here. Stephen, maybe I'll kind of start with you and everyone else jump in, just kind of what's been in the news lately. And I'm curious if the city of Ferguson going to court with the federal government is going to kind of suck the air out of the room of the things that we're talking about here tonight. That certainly seems to be an unexpected twist for a lot of people.
I don't think it will. I mean, I think that they all along have been separate from the city of Ferguson. I don't think there's been much involvement from the city at all in terms of some of the reforms and plans, programs that the Ferguson Commission has put on the table.
Ferguson's been in the title, but it's not. Even the meetings weren't in Ferguson.
Yeah, I mean, and I think Starsky Wilson, like from the beginning, thought it was a mistake to name it the Ferguson Commission. I mean, I heard him say it in a public meeting because the problems they're dealing with are so much broader than Ferguson. Ferguson maybe embodies some of those problems, but everything else is there's a lot more that the commission looks at.
I think that having Ferguson in the title of the report is extremely important because people understand what those issues are when they look to Ferguson. And although they are extreme in that way across the country, when you say Ferguson, people know exactly what you're talking about. They know that you're talking about people that are underrepresented, people that are ignored, predatory policing, unconstitutional courts, unemployment, poverty, health disparities. So it encapsulates exactly what we are doing. And in that way, I believe that it's very important.
Does it look like we're not, do we look resistant to change with this lawsuit and what's going on there, or does that bother you?
Yes.
Yes. Simple answer, yes.
Yes.
And
is that going to slow progress?
Not at all, not at all. What it does is it confirms that the work of the commission was required, that the complaints in community, that the riots and unrest were needed because of the abuses, and you've got a municipal government that functions like many of the other municipalities in St. Louis County, abusing a populace in the same manner. Their resistance to change, to even acknowledge that harm was done, to stand against the Department of Justice. And as a resident of Ferguson, I don't want to be a combatant with the United States of America when my country is trying to protect my civil and constitutional rights. And so while the municipality doubles down in its abuses and its hubris and arrogance and the way that it's operated, I think that it gives us more validity in terms of moving the work forward the way that it's designed and the way that we're committed.
This was not. This did not go unnoticed on social media. Patricia Bynes weighed in and said it was a sad message for the city of Ferguson, the city council, that they probably don't care to learn. You can't compromise on everything. There are lines in the sand. Others weighing in all week as well. Of course, the city of Ferguson saying that they can't afford these reforms that the DOJ is asking for. That they had actually agreed to with the DOJ before they voted on it.
Well, I mean, the mayor said that they didn't agree, that they agreed to take it before the public and then kind of go from there and see what the public thought.
Is the cost going to put them out of business, and that would be worse in the long run?
I think that's debatable. I mean, I think that the numbers that were provided by the city finance director, that there's some good reasons to question those numbers. And there's a lot of people in Ferguson who think that they were inflated, dummied up, whatever term you want to use, to kind of give certain leaders political cover to vote this thing down.
So back to the issue that you say is both tied in but also separate. Focus. Tell me how Focus is involved here, because I believe there was almost a request for submissions for people to take on the work of the Ferguson Commission. And Focus was the only group that submitted. Tell me the role that Focus will have as we go forward.
Well, we're happy that Focus stepped up. As the civic leadership organization, it's the role of leaders to do what is required and requested. But as we paused after sunset, we realized that we needed a design that could move the work forward in the way that the community needed and trusted. And as a strategic partner with Forward Through Ferguson, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this work with my friends and colleagues, there are some people that don't know Focus, and the things that Focus does well, we want Focus to be in that lane and continue in that expertise. But we know that there are other strategic partners that do the thing that we need so that the solutions are comprehensive, so that all of the community continues to be involved in the way that they were in the commission process. So I'm really excited about that. In fact, we're launching a new leadership program, Focus Impact Fellows. It is our most advanced leadership program. We're using the Forward Through Ferguson report as our guidepost. I've got a fantastic team of 25 fellows that we just selected. Today is Wednesday? Yesterday, they were announced, and they're all anxious to get with this work and design. Our hope is to design strategies for implementation using the Forward Through Ferguson report. And so I'll be directing that program, and we're ready to go.
Rasheen, is anything happening so far? Have you seen any change going since your commission wrapped?
I think, like Felicia said, on the other aspect of things, there has been community groups, well-respected community groups like OBS, MCU, Missouri Jobs with Justice, that also have said, we want to make sure that these recommendations that the Ferguson Commission put forward is actually done. Understanding that Focus isn't necessarily the best community partner or has a lot of community work, maybe like OBS has and Ward 22 or Missouri Jobs with Justice have been with the low-wage workers. Having these community partners to actually make sure that the community voice is still highlighted, to make sure that community still has a say-so and that it don't get too big, and that people on the ground can still have a voice and still can figure out how do they play a role through the process.
This is something we saw on social media this week. People are starting to kind of get maybe a little antsy. Maybe they want to see things happen faster. This infuriates me so much. More useless meetings. This is Bucky Barnes. How about Focus and civic process do something tangible for once? We've got 189 calls to action here. How do we narrow this down and to a point where people can, where they're going about their daily lives, can wrap their head around what's going to be done?
So I think, in the process of developing the report, many of the commissioners said, we've got to get this down to 5. People stop listening after 3. We've got to make this 5 things. And we had a process design where we were going to stop writing calls to action in June and start writing the report. We didn't stop writing calls to action until August, till maybe early September, right before the report was due, because the working groups that we had gathered of over 100 community leaders and practitioners said, wait, this is our chance. This is our moment to make sure we look at all of this stuff, that we include all of this data, and we make all these calls. And we ended up with like 189, 200 calls, and we pulled out, I think, initially through a very intensive algorithm-driven process with the commissioners, maybe 30 signature calls. So we had a 8-hour meeting to narrow those 30 calls down into 10, and we came out with 47. So this was really a situation where we kept bringing people to the table whose number one goal was to narrow it down, and when they were faced with the issues and faced with the depth of the problems that we were dealing with, said, we can't leave these things off the table. These things go together. You can't address this without addressing this. And that's why we have this many. So that is to say that there are people who feel very passionately about this work. For the Sake of All is a perfect example. a lot, they're, I think, one of the #1 cited research papers in our report. They are tackling, just last Friday, they had a day-long session with about 100 community leaders who sat down in 8 different areas and made action plans. There's the organization, the Scholarship Foundation. They have a student activism team that directly took one of the calls to action, which was apply a racial equity lens to state-funded higher education scholarships. They did that. We didn't even know about it until they were done and they were releasing their data. So I think there are that many calls because there's that many issues. And the reason that those calls made it into the report are that there are people who are working on these things. So it's up to us to, right.
I'm really encouraged about it because there's so many areas where we need to work and people with expertise and passion that are doing the work.
Yep.
So when we have last year at their annual meeting, when our regional chamber identifies specific calls to action and says, this is our responsibility and we will work on these calls, then I feel that it provides an opportunity, an avenue, and encouragement for other people to do the same with the areas that they have passion and expertise that concern them. And influence, absolutely.
WashU Chancellor Mark Wrighton also kind of putting his neck out there a little bit as well. Are they taking on some accountability?
I believe that they are in the process of convening around, and I'm not sure which body, but they have actually taken on adopting some calls to action and figuring out action plans, how they will be executing them within their world.
The Regional Business Council
Same
is
thing.
working seriously on education issues. They are on the ground in North County districts working on education issues. This work is getting done.
And that's what makes me hopeful about the process. And me being the young person, I wish
One of the young people at the table.
One of the young folks around here, just one. But it's moments where I wish things can happen very quick too. Wish that all this stuff can just go away. That police can actually police the community and not harass the community. That working families can go home and just work one job. But I'm hopeful because I feel like, within this last year from the people on the ground with the Ferguson Commission, it is folks like WashU and the Business Chamber, and it is other individuals that are having conversations about race, even all the way on a national level where you see our presidential candidates being held to the fire, making sure they're being held accountable, and making sure they're talking about these important things, and making sure they have a racial equity lens when they're going about and they're talking to different people. So. It's a process, and we're in Missouri, so.
Compromising since 1820.
And I know that, but I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that people are not going back to before August 9th.
What do you see when you're in those council meetings in Ferguson? To just use that as a sample for maybe the larger region. Do you see people who are, and I'm not talking about the people at the dais, I'm talking about people in the audience. Are they ready for change? Are they willing to work together?
I don't know. Yeah, I think so. I think some of them definitely are. I think there is a strong sense among some people that Ferguson is a scapegoat for the region's problems, and it's going to have to suffer the consequences of that. And they're angry about that. I mean, at the last meeting that I was at, I mean, the two sides were yelling expletives across the room at one another. So, I mean, there is a lot of hostility there. And from the activist side, I mean, they feel like this decision was done in a really disingenuous way. To come out and say, we're approving the most expansive consent decree ever, but not really approve it, so I just, there's a strong sense of betrayal on that side.
And I think the same sort of thing is holding in the balance for the working group of the municipal courts that are putting their report to the Missouri Supreme Court in the next week or so. I mean, the call for consolidation of the municipal courts is about being able to have reasonable oversight for all of these courts where there have been documented abuses of power. And to do reforms at an individual level doesn't allow for that oversight. And so I think, were we to end up 2 weeks from now be talking about how the Supreme Court said they don't have the power to do anything, that's literally telling the people who've been, abused for the last 20 years that nobody can help them. We've taken it to the highest court and they've said that they can't do anything. So, it's everybody standing in a room with people in the corner, having nobody who can do anything for them.
The Ferguson Commission had a deadline because they didn't want to live on in perpetuity. Do we have deadlines now? Do we have goals, benchmarks?
I think that that is one of the things that is in the court of Forward Through Ferguson and some of our key partners to balance the reality that these are generational changes. So the things that we're dealing with and the things that we're unraveling are based on legislation that is hundreds and hundreds of years old, that has other new legislation on top of it, on top of it, on top of it. So like the issues that we're dealing with are systemic in nature and will not change overnight. But we have to balance that generational reality with what are our early benchmarks, what are our early wins, what can we call a process win? You know, when the DOJ can actually hear and listen to the community, when, if in Ferguson is able to have a real conversation with their community, can we call that a win? When we're able to apply a racial equity lens and get a state-funded scholarship changed, is that a win? So being able to frame those things and see the pieces that we can see move quickly, and help people understand how the things that are going to take a generation are going to take a generation, and also maybe see some accountability wins to help people understand that if the Supreme Court can't help them, where can they go? How can we move this forward? Those can be wins as well.
And I think more people want to see those accountability wins because when you have situations with the consent decree, it only puts everyone marking the sand deeper. It makes the community feel like, once again, you know, our voice does not matter, our actions does not matter. The commission report that folks
Stacking the papers because we're running out of time. We'll continue talking for here in just a second. Thanks for watching.